Welcome everyone to this session. If you're looking for bad bodies, this is the session. We have three presenters and we're going to follow the program, Micaela, and then we're going to have Lyndré and then Mbali. And all of you are using the presentation, so there'll be someone to help with this. All right, we'll start with you, Micaela, and Micaela is going to talk to us about her title. The title of her paper is Acts of Damage, Historical Influences on the Endometriosis Experience.
It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, but I don't know, Mbali and Lyndré, don't you want to sit on this side?
To see this.
Because then you can't really see much. You're going to all have 20 minutes, and I will show you the red notice. But you can start.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. My name is Micaela Scholtz. I'm a researcher, teacher, designer, and member of Invisible Illness. I will proceed by presenting my paper entitled Acts of Damage, Historical Influences on the Endometriosis Experience. Identity, social movements, and culture impacts the female body and expectations thereof, historically viewed as a thing to be shaped according to ideals set by patriarchal society. It's been believed that if a woman did not effectuate the roles of marriage and motherhood as socially prescribed, the intended purpose and use of the uterus would be deprived. An understanding and consciousness about female reproductive health revolves mainly around the ability to reproduce and does not explicitly relate to women with reproductive illnesses unable or unwilling to reproduce. Thus, the experiences of women with such conditions are repudiated by society and the medical sphere at large. In response to such societal pressures on women with gynecological conditions, the effects and experiences of their illnesses are often masked, resulting in an array of complications like the misunderstanding, misdiagnosis, and misrepresentation. Scholtz notes that such notions and modes of representation should be reviewed and challenged in order to encourage fluidity about such issues, allowing the archaic and once silenced narratives to reflect an unfeigned experience. What is in question is from where do these stereotypical perceptions originate, and how does it impact the female reproductive body, in particular those experiencing endometriosis? It is important to cast light on the often suppressed narratives of gynecological issues that have been predominantly dismissed or forgotten in the chasms of history. However, before the brief historical outline is established, a definition of endometriosis is required, ensuring a clear understanding of the main research area. Endometriosis, as defined by Binaggiano, Brosens, and Lippi, involves the active presence of endometrial-like tissue or lesions located in the pelvic cavity or elsewhere in the body, affecting the normal physiology of reproductive organs, causing pain, inflammation, and bleeding. These lesions respond to hormonal stimulation and thus act in a similar way to menstrual periods. In addition to this, it is worth noting that endometriosis is a progressive, debilitating, and chronic condition affecting both adult and adolescent women. Endometriosis is a disease associated with decreased health, and its symptoms are unique to each person. While there is no definite cause of endometriosis, there are multiple aspects influencing the emergence thereof, such as hormonal imbalances, immune disorders, or inflammation. According to Moradi, Parker, Snedden, and Lopez, in the study titled Impact of Endometriosis on Women's Lives, a qualitative study, established that women with endometriosis experience many additional complex effects, such as a comprised fertility, changes to physical appearance, limited energy, feelings associated with depression, low self-esteem, as well as a reduction in social and physical activity. This often results in a negative impact on psychological, physical, financial, and other lifestyle factors. A comprehensive and correct diagnosis can take up to 10 years, and the most effective, and at this stage only, method of relief is through laparoscopic or otherwise known as keyhole surgery. Now, in current times, it is a rather common gynecological condition, yet still underdiagnosed and largely misunderstood. During 1927, Dr. John A. Sampson discovered bleeding lesions while operating on women during their time of menstruation, and so determined that this was mainly caused by endometrial cells flowing in the wrong direction through the fallopian tubes elsewhere into the body. From 1932 and onwards, reports of severe pelvic pain related to menstruation increased. In the late 1940s, laparoscopic surgery improved and was able to reveal new information about this mystery disease, still regarded as the most accurate tool for diagnosis and management. As noted by Neshat et al., the representation of pelvic pain and various issues pertaining to the female body has historically been rather elusive and neglected. For example, accounts of menstrual pain were rarely recorded and with very little detail. Locating such occurrences have been particularly difficult as many researchers have disagreed on the exact discovery of endometriosis and by whom. Thus, what follows is a compressed timeline of events leading up to the estimated discovery and categorization of gynecological developments pertaining to endometriosis. Recently labeled as the ancient disease, early signs of endometriosis can be traced from 1855 BC and onwards. During this time, the ancient Egyptians established a phrase known as strangulation or suffocation of the womb, a term used to loosely define what was later referred to as hysteria, a disease believed to reside in the uterus due to a lack of its intended use, leading to psychological concerns. It has been gathered that the strangulation of the womb led to an extreme nervous predisposition, quickly progressing to outright hysteria, or often categorized as overt insanity. The symptoms and experiences associated with hysteria are linked to sexual evolution, pregnancy, strange thoughts, unexpected feelings and emotions, unstable appetites, and other radical impulses. These were all classified as affecting a mind otherwise pure and innocent. Barker Benfield states that based on these accounts, it was recognized that all women's issues stem from their physiology, thus setting on the notion that hysteria could be treated in a similar way to physical bodily disorders, endorsing the removal of ovaries as a cure to such insanities experienced. The deterioration of women and their overwrought complaints, often due to sexual transgressions, is said to have called gynecology into practice. In the 4th and 5th centuries BC, the Hippocratic corpus, which is comprised of texts and theories relating to gynecology by various authors, established a range of unambiguous factors and symptoms indicative of a suffocating womb and endometriosis. The following factors were considered prognostic of gynecologic disease: menstrual dysfunction, regarding pregnancy as a short-term relief of symptoms, pain associated with reproductive organs, and infertility. Leading to 77 AD, the Greek physician Dioscorides first acknowledged menstrual pain as a condition which is pathological and requires medication for the management thereof, something that physicians regularly fail to recognize. Thereafter, between 98 and 138 AD, radical theories about the suffocation of the womb emerged. Soranus described many endometriosis-like symptoms leading to the suffocation of the womb, with inflammation of the uterus outlined as the origin. In order to provide detailed evidence of his discoveries, autopsies were performed, which would have been considered high risk and unaccustomed for that period. A century after Dioscorides, between 129 and 216 AD, Claudius Galen offered pertinent clinical symptoms and to date the clearest description of indicators pointing to endometriosis and/or endometrial adhesions. It was discovered that these adhesions occur when membranes within the uterus became repleted with excessive menstrual blood. Following this identification in 502 to 575 AD, Aetius of Amida became the first to propose that the suffocation of the womb was primarily triggered by menstruation and related complications. This breakthrough in European medicine, believed to have widely influenced the development of gynecology, was obstructed when the discordant treatment practice was initiated. Quote, choking the necks of women suffering from uterine suffocation. This therapy was believed to induce the womb to return to its rightful place. End quote. Terribly violent and problematic, this approach expedites the authority to implement invasive gynecological practices for years to come. During the period between 1845 and 1849, James Marion Sims, deemed the founder of modern surgical gynecology, performed a course of experimental and invasive gynecological procedures on free whites and black enslaved women, acknowledging that no anesthesia was administered. The aim of these experiments were twofold. Firstly, Sims wanted to provide women with relief from obstetric vesicovaginal fistulas, an injury to the soft tissue of the pelvis, often due to childbirth. Pursuing to cure such women from their glaringly gendered anguish, while the second objective was to develop pioneering surgical tools and techniques relating to the female reproductive health. In the paper titled The Medical Ethics of Dr. J. Marion Sims, A Fresh Look at the Historical Record, Wall summarizes the precarious conditions in Sims's discoveries. Firstly, the use of slaves for medical experimentation was needless, as advances in gynecology by the 19th century were already substantial, due to the discoveries made on white women in an ethical manner with consent. Secondly, Sims's practice was underhanded, as performing any surgical procedures on enslaved individuals were illegal. They could not have given voluntary and informed consent. It was only to be granted by their masters. Lastly, it is clear that Sims's failure to administer anesthesia during these operations holds traces of racism. Green notes that these actions to be distinctly superior, labeling 19th century gynecology as an act of men fixed upon controlling women. Although none of this perceived as problematic by society or medical practitioners during the earlier periods of history, the ongoing effects of such damaging acts are ever present in gynecology, particularly in the perception, understanding, and treatment of endometriosis. Sims's decision not to use any numbing or anesthetic techniques are based on the misguided belief that women are made to endure pain and experience it differently to men, a notion still marked today. Illustrating these ever-present historic effects, Dr. Deirdre Cooper Owens writes about her recent experience in starting a phase of fertility treatments. She notes that during the procedure, she experienced the most, quote, intense physical pain of my life, end quote. The treatment referred to involves a 20-minute procedure in which the cervix is dilated. In her case, the endocrinologist did not administer anesthesia, resulting in pain and agony. What was most distressing to Owens was the fact that in 2016 she was treated so mercilessly by a doctor who believed that she did not require anything to relieve the pain, reminding her of how Sims had treated enslaved women. A woman's body is considered something which naturally suffers. Thus, the pain and effects of endometriosis are often ignored. What follows is an autographic account of my experience with endometriosis and the treatment thereof. I have been living with pain for as long as I can remember. I have seen many doctors who dismissed my feelings and diagnosed me with various ailments. I have been told that I am stressed, depressed, unhealthy, and sleep deprived. I was never satisfied with the diagnosis I received from doctors, and I constantly questioned myself, wondering whether I was overreacting or imagining things. In a moment of unbearable pain, I was rushed to the emergency room, and after 9 years, I was officially diagnosed with endometriosis. However, during this time leading up to my diagnosis, I have experienced a particularly damaging moment, and the feeling thereof is ingrained in my memory. I was waiting to see the gynecologist upon my admittance to hospital, overcome with emotions. The vulnerability of my situation had suddenly dawned on me. The doctor questioned my overall health, family history, previous procedures, and of course my menstrual cycle. Thereafter, he guided me into the examination room and explained the tests which would now be performed. I was hesitant and uncomfortable and explained through tears that I would not like to proceed, as at that point it was too invasive, something I was not physically and emotionally ready to undergo. He did not listen to my requests and did not allow me to leave the room. Instead, he waited until I got undressed, proceeded to perform his examination regarding in my alienation to the process, person, and illness. During another scan, he clearly defined that there was blood behind my uterus, which made it impossible to locate the ovaries. This needed to be cleared, and so he informed me that I would have a well-deserved laparoscopy. The point of this extract is not to be interpreted as overly sensitive or as an act of looking for sympathy from others. In saying this, I do need to acknowledge that I am rather fortunate in the manner in which my diagnosis came about. The fact that I was put on a treatment plan quite quickly, resulting in my endometriosis to be mostly under control, makes me feel quite lucky. However, what is to be gathered here is the experience of male supremacy or dominance, a lack of sympathy and dismissal of feelings in the medical sphere, the disregard of my non-consent, as well as the perception that I as a patient was just looking for attention and as a result got what I wanted or deserved. Through reflecting on such personal experiences with endometriosis and considering the damaging historic effects, a creative practice emerged, challenging and questioning the misguided beliefs surrounding endometriosis and records the voices of women previously silenced. The following works are a result of the experience outlined in the autoethnographic extract. It responds primarily to the feelings of vulnerability and alienation and visualizes a moment often hidden, unknown, or otherwise invisible. Similarly, the work depicts a sense of loneliness. The blue overlay enhances the cold clinical feeling experienced during a gynecological examination, while also alluding to the uncompassionate treatment experienced. Creating the work in an intuitive manner, the use of layers felt appropriate, symbolizing the numerous complexities of the disease. In order to attain these layers, a double exposure was used and captured with a film camera. Multiple figures, objects, and textures can be seen in the compositions, which signify feelings and the actual position in which the body is required during an internal examination. The hard, sharp, overwhelming, and bone-like objects create reference and tactility to what is often felt by a woman with endometriosis, or in this case, during the examination. The work portrays that which is often left unseen and only observed between woman and doctor. By providing a confronting yet vulnerable view of the subject, the viewer is said to feel emotionally that which I had to endure. Thus, these shared feelings leads to an awareness and understanding. Disregarding a patient's feelings has an immense emotional impact and causes women to question themselves, constantly feeling obliged to validate their feelings and experiences. What is sought after is empathetic treatment, not the dismissal of feelings from doctors. It has been gathered that women with endometriosis want to feel informed and educated about this disease, leading to them being an empowered partner in their journey. In conclusion, one can discern that a physician makes a treatment decision based on the interpretation and assessment of a woman's pain rather than on her lived experience. It is evident that this perception is influenced by historic notions such as Sims's experimental practices, whilst acknowledging that this illness, much like other gynecological complications, cannot be seen on the outside of the body, comprising its believability and is consistently misrepresented. By reason of substantial evidence uncovered, it is now understandable that hysteria, the once mystery disorder, for centuries believed to be psychological, was presumably endometriosis all along. Thank you.
We're going to take all presentations first, and then we will have questions and answers later. Thank you, Micaela.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
So the PowerPoint is not that heavy, né? It's just for reference purposes as I'm speaking. As per my abstract, my presentation today is part of my PhD, which I recently completed. The title for that, I think, is important just so that you can get where this is coming from, was Rebellious Black Femininities, Embodiments of Freedom, Desire, and Agency in South African Popular Culture from the 1980s to present. And so the structure of my thesis was chronological in the sense that the women that I think through with and alongside are situated within specific time periods, which is how I decided to structure the work. Although we do see how these women that I will introduce are connected and how they move back and forth into one another through space and time. So I'm seeking rebellious, as I'm seeking rebellious femininities, I look to three particular figures, those being Brenda Fassie, who emerged in the 1980s, Lebo Mathosa, who emerged in the 1990s, and then I am especially interested in how Black femininities that surfaced during the final decade of apartheid and the transitional period are constructed and read as rebellious because of their aesthetic and media representation and their embodiment of freedom, desire, and agency. I explore how these earlier Black femininities, so particularly Brenda and Lebo, resonate in the contemporary South African imaginary through, for example, the dress, subcultures, and self-identification of certain young Black women like Kanyumbao and myself that I feel connected to in the present socio-political landscape. So I think through through the notion of figures, right, so figuration, and I borrow from Haraway. I just have this. I don't think I'm going to go through all of it, but maybe the first few sentences. And she says that figures collect up hopes and fears and show possibilities and dangers, both imaginary and material. Figures root people in stories and link them to histories. Stories are always more generous, capacious than ideologies. In that fact is one of my strongest hopes. I want to know how to inhabit stories, histories and stories, rather than deny them. I want to know how to critically live both inherited and novel kinships in a spirit of neither condemnation or celebration. I'm just going to leave that here. And so the biographies of Brenda, Lebo, and Kanyumbao that I kind of construct or read through in my work are not exhaustive, right? So I don't make the claim that these are full biographies. And they do not rest on a universal notion of truth, but are rather constructed from available public archives. And so through the reading of these biographies, I explore how desire, freedom, and agency are present as historical and current possibilities for Black women occupying different yet connected spaces and times. The overarching theory through which I explore desire, freedom, and agency is Audre Lorde's theory of the erotic. And here I assert that rebellious femininities, by virtue of claiming and revealing the works of freedom, agency, and desire, are examples of Lorde's claim to the erotic as our full and creative life force, from which to live meaningfully and pleasurably and to thrive. So in preparation for today, I thought that rather than beginning with the figures, right, that I just mentioned, Brenda and Lebo and Kanye, that I would kind of begin where I end off in my thesis. And that conclusion concerns myself. And it brings me back to this point of full circle of realizing that, you know what, maybe I've kind of been living my erotic, or I'm more inspired to be self-affirmative in that way. And so, yeah, I have this notion of the figures, right? And you'll see the first bubble is myself. And I term myself the academic slave queen, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that, right? And so in this image, which is the first bubble, I'm sitting with my favorite cocktail at one of my favorite cocktail bars. This is in Joburg, Melville. I was at Sixes, for those that know. And my off-the-shoulder top slides down my broad shoulders with a very plunging V neckline. My cleavage is out. My manicured hands hold a Long Island cocktail as I take a sip. Following the straw from the base of the glass to its tip, you see my face. I have eyelashes on that are probably 5 kilometers long, as usual, and a full face of makeup. A long jet black, bone-straight wig hangs down the side of my right shoulder. However, unlike Kanyumbao, who's in the last bubble that you see, Lebo Matosa, who's right there, and Brenda Fassi as well, sorry guys. Okay, so unlike these icons, I am not slender. And Selisho, who's a cultural journalist, reminds us that part of the markers of being slave queens include being slender and specifically having an hourglass figure. I recall a conversation I had a few years ago, and I do, in my work as well, I do go back in time to kind of revisit the kinds of comments that I've had about what I look like or how I present. And one of them was, this is from a white woman, and she asked me, "Are you married to a minister?"
Like a church minister.
Not like a political minister, right? The assumption, rich aunt, I look rich, or I look a particular way, so there's no way I can just look like this, right? Then someone asked me, "So what do you do," right? And hesitantly, I just said, "I'm a teacher." A friend of mine said, "No, she's an academic." And as a result, that person kept quiet in disbelief, right? And some of these words and these dialogues, they stay with me because they always escape the mouths of people who I think like women's business way too much. But also, it's the very people that look out for the respectability of women. And I've included these other stories as a point of departure into my work. And because of the choices that I make in appearance and presentation, I am often subject to questions concerning my line of work to determine how respectable I am. Also, I do have a deeper conversation on Kanyambao, and I am aware of the meanings ascribed to women like her, like me, that seek only to relate us to men and access to men's fictional wealth. Well, especially in South Africa, because we all know what that is. Additionally, while I present mostly in terms of fashioning and adorning my body, similar to women that are defined as slave queens in derogatory ways, I am also read as a potential wife to someone. And I'm not sure why that is. Perhaps it's because I'm fat and I look old enough to be married. Nonetheless, what I look like is still tied to an assumption that a wealthy man sponsors my life and my aesthetic, or how I choose to look and represent myself. Provoking and irritating these gendered regimes of power, but most importantly, claiming my embodied power and full creative life force, as Lord encourages to do as an exercise of the erotic. I think of myself as an academic slay queen. And to slay, as Selusho says, has its origins in the history of queer drag and ballroom culture, where contestants are instructed to show up as their best selves, irrespective of what the normative social script dictates. But that is my version of rebellion, which I read as diverse, shifting, and complicated, as per my study on women like Brenda Fassie, Lebo, and Kanye. So in order to have returned to myself at the end of my thesis, I've done a lot of wondering about this notion of rebellion, how it connects, departs, differentiates, and works with subversion and the figure of the killjoy. I am all too aware of the danger in using the concept of rebellion because the Cartesian mind splits encourage us to read rebellion and resistance as the binary opposite of being passive, traditional, or docile. Danai Mokotsa argues that thinking, existing, and acting alongside or beside rebellion and rebellious girls is an ethic that allows for, and I quote, a wide range of desiring, identifying, representing, repelling, paralleling, differentiating, rivaling, leaning, twistiness, mimicking, withdrawing, attracting, aggressing, warping, and other relations. Therefore, I am inspired to work against binaries and a reading of rebellion that is polarizing, and consider it to mean a mode of subversion, resistance, and survival that is simultaneously engaged in co-constructing and reimagining for Black women. In a renegade called Simpiwe, Pumla Gola writes about the iconicity of Simpiwe Dana as artist, rebel, and feminist. While Simpiwe Dana was and remains an artist widely celebrated within the jazz musical genre, she can also be located within the musical and artistic tradition of Afropop, and consequently remembered and thought through and alongside the likes of Brenda Fassie. Gola locates Dana as a rebel because Dana widens many people's perspectives on what is appropriate and imaginable. She uses the notion of renegade to describe Dana as someone who works against the script, even within defiant spaces, which she uses to refer to as some of the political Black spaces within which we seek community but do not always find it because of the invisibilization and erasure of Black women. We should allow ourselves to exist imaginatively, excitedly, and pleasurably, and describing women like Dana as renegades and rebels in the context of feminist reimagining necessarily means creating. Gola offers us an understanding and reading of rebellion through Simpiwe Dana as engaged in subversion, imagination, co-construction, and recreation. In contrast, the rebellion with which I am concerned with is also more politically oblique, so not always easily or readily legible, and powerfully rooted in certain Black women's performance and celebration of unruly bodies that defy even certain feminist norms of respectability. The Naimobotsa offers a very profound reading of the wide subversiveness of rebellious girls by also thinking through a notion of undutiful daughters, what it means to be undutiful. right? And Mopotsa considers the figure of the undutiful daughter as not only defying one, but many standards of convention, tradition, and discipline, therefore defamiliarizing from those traditions. Becoming an undutiful daughter means disloyalty to structure and convention is a process and not a matter of biological essentialism. Bright Doty inspires readers to think about the various ways that we can be disloyal to structure by centering the idea of being undutiful to convention as an articulation of what she terms nomadic feminisms or nomadic subjects. Nomadic feminisms, like undutiful or disloyal daughters, are not constrained by the need and desire to adhere to structure and identity. And this just reminds me of Prof. Gola's comment today about not seeking approval, right? But rather that we should seek to exist in multiplicity, complexity, and with the willfulness to reinvent in any form of our choosing. So in effect, undutiful daughters are also multiple and varying in their dissonance, which produces social and political options for women. Creating spaces for women to consider their options is something that Brenda Fassie is well known for. Brenda Fassie's spirit of political and cultural defiance was captured at the outset of her career. So in Not a Bad Girl, which is a documentary following her life, cultural historian Vincent Colby argues that Fassie appealed to Black township youth because of her spirit of defiance. And during the 1980s, Fassie was a teenager and through her music resisted apartheid alongside her peers. Both her personal life and discography simultaneously reject, complicate, and reproduce societal norms. In particular, translations of select songs offer a reading of Fassie's art and personal life as directly and indirectly political. For example, Weekend Special is a commentary on the political and intimate context of the 1980s, where apartheid repression intersected with Black family life and the complex sexual relationships formed in townships. It's very important to note that the chorus to Weekend Special is often sung differently, which directly impacts the narration of the story behind the song. And so I offered two interpretations of the song, specifically the chorus. Unfortunately, I couldn't play the song. 5 minutes, okay. So you can read the body of a Weekend Special, but particularly in the chorus, there's a notion that we're not sure if she's saying, I'm your Weekend Special or I know Weekend Special. And it depends entirely on who's singing the song and what they're trying to say. And so as a result of the forceful movement of men from their homes to work in mines and live in hostels, nuclear Black families were structured. At times, it was women who worked in the city while their families remained in the rural areas. The migrant labor system was what Brenda responded to with Weekend Special. But through specific observation of the song and Fassie's performance of it, I assert that she also presents a liberated femininity that departs from a dependence on male presence, contrary to what would have been expected. The general assumption is that women would not be having sex and that their everyday lives were difficult and miserable, right? Mm-hmm. However, Brenda does something interesting by seemingly celebrating this absence through her song and dance performance, especially if you watch the live versions of them. Similarly, scholars like Siporazi Tao notes that Weekend Special is a critique of monogamous relationships in the township, suggesting that there is a type of woman who is comfortable with being a Weekend Special. One who is only in a relationship during the weekend, which Fassie states is not. Fassie introduces the idea that women can decide whether to move on with other lovers, either simultaneously or following a breakup, without feeling ashamed about it. It also articulates a sexual desire for women that refuse to conform to the representation of women as focused primarily on relationship. So Weekend Special, as I mentioned, it's either you sing the yo or the no. And this phenomenon is known as a mondegree, right? Referring to the mishearing of words. However, in the case of the song, it is unclear whether listeners mishear or deliberately modify the lyrics. And so in Not a Bad Girl, Fassie performs Weekend Special live and is clearly her chanting, I'm not your Weekend Special. However, some fans and even some music directories that provide lyrics provide different lyrics. There could be a number of reasons for this modification. One reason could be to portray women as monogamous and therefore waiting for when daddy's home, right? So that's another, you don't know if that is on or daddy's home. And that's something interesting that she does, I think, in the way that she's pronouncing and singing the song. But looking into the lyric as I'm your weekend special, daddy's home does something more complex than simply portray women as dependent on the presence of men. Brenda's work, particularly this single, consciously or unconsciously offers women listeners an opportunity to accept, celebrate, enjoy, or reject and denounce being a part-time lover. Weekend Special also asks questions about various shifting, paralleling, and different articulations of femininity and sexualities. Brenda may assert that she's not a weekend special, while another woman may say that she is. And Gola reminds us that in Brenda's lyrics, a variety of subject positions can be found, thus making available unpredictable Black woman personas. These personas and gendered narratives exist alongside each other rather than oppositionally. I promise you can have 2 more seconds to introduce Lebo. Thank you. Okay.
2 minutes.
Okay. So in 1994, we introduced to Boom Shaka. And it's about time. It's Boom Shaka. We have Lebo, we've got Tembi, and I'm not gonna mention the 2 names. It's not about the 2 men in the band. It's not about them. And in 2004, Lebo breaks away from the band and she forms her own solo career, which is quite successful. And in 2004, pictures of Lebo performing in a miniskirt without underwear appear and circulate on the internet. And Liverman reminds us that during this time in South Africa, but also across Africa, the surveillance of women's dress had become increasingly explicit, criminalized, and linked to discourses on sexual violence. And from the early 2000s in South Africa, women wearing miniskirts with or without underwear were accused of inviting sexual attention, and consequently were subject to sexual violence. Vincent highlights that South African police records suggest that the practice of humiliating and violating women in miniskirts became common and was most documented from around the year 2000. And as we recall, in South African taxi ranks, particularly in South Africa where the taxi drivers are majority male, women wearing miniskirts were frequently physically targeted and assaulted, with the narrative that the miniskirt implied that women were inviting the sexual attention. And then around this time, Lebo decides at Moreleta Park in Pretoria that she's going to shoot a song and a video called Siyazwisa. And I can't directly translate what Siyazwisa means, but it's we're having a good time, right? This is the song, right? And she's dancing, she's really having a good time. And this is the height of all of this violence that's happening with women in taxi ranks and, skimpy wear, whatever it is. And she says, she asks, and then she rhetorically asks in her song, Siyazwisa or Ganjani, which she means, or what other option do we have? In a very matter-of-fact style of speech. And part of the lyrics of the song, I label encouraging women to show umzimba namabele wakho, show your body, because it's katisfikile. This is new in democracy. The time is now, so we're entitled to this freedom. All right, sorry guys, that was just that. We're entitled to this freedom. And so she gestures to the changes in the political landscape that render available freedoms that were previously not allowed. And despite the public and grotesque forms of violence against women in provocative forms of dress at the time, Lebo pushes back by asserting that there's no better time than now for women to freely show their bodies. And she shows that people could see her, that while people could see her naked bodies, it was hers and not theirs. And Lebo encouraged us to say the same thing. Okay, I'm gonna leave it there. There's so much more, but I'm gonna leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbali. You can say more in the Q&A.
Okay, I will. This is mine.
All right, the next presentation is by Lyndré, and her topic is how my hair is my extension.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lyndré Bonhomme. I'm from Durban, and I'm doing my final year master's at Rhodes University in the drama department. So, my topic is how my hair is my extension, a deeper look into the making of Hairology 2023, which is my master's final piece. Okay, and there's just a short video I'd like to play just before I get into it.
I picked up the scissors, I placed them on my head, and I cut, and I cut, and I cut, and I cut.
Yes, that is true. But it's also come to the realization that hair is just hair, right? And you should be able to do with it whatever you want to. Whether you want to have it natural, twisted up, wash, whatever you want to do with your hair, if that is how you express yourself, I will do it.
It's so fresh, ma'am. So fresh? Yes.
Listen, beauty is painful. Being a woman is painful.
Sit down, sit, shut up. Not to make a career. You know that very well. It is not allowed. Okay, well, if I know it, shouldn't pay for it with your own money. Stinky, stinky, Aya. It's just hair.
Okay, so that was just a snippet into what the play looked like for festival. So getting into hairology itself, right? So as part of my practice as research in my final year masters, I've devised and directed a play based on the book Hair, Weaving and Unpicking Stories of Identity. The play is a 45-minute work which looks into the lives of 5 women of color and their stories and their struggles with their hair in post-apartheid South Africa. Apart from being quirky and relatable, the play asks you to look at the relationship between you and your hair. Yeah? So just a bit of personal history with regards to why I decided to go on this journey. For the most part of my life, I've been described by many people as racially ambiguous. Many people were not sure of my race because my skin color says one thing, but my hair, back in the day when I was in my youth said another thing. Growing up, having long, thick, coarse hair, my race was always questioned. This allowed insecurities around what I was to fester and brew. And for the longest time, I've been connected with my hair being my identity as a colored female. My mother has always made sure that my hair looked presentable and neat. The only way to achieve this was by chemically treating my hair, otherwise known as relaxing it. Um, Otherwise known as relaxing it. My mother recalls the day she decided to relax my hair as it was a hot, sunny afternoon, and my mother was brushing and combing and styling my hair for school the next day, and she was breaking a sweat while doing it. And when she was done, she put down the brush and decided that the very next day, instead of going to school, she would book me an appointment to get my hair relaxed as she could not handle it anymore. After my hair was relaxed, my identity had shifted drastically, and I was known as the girl with long, straight, thick hair. Yeah. And while I deeply enjoyed the end-on compliments I received from my hair, I couldn't help but wonder if other people shared the same connection towards their hair like myself. So growing up, I've been conditioned to look after my hair as it is seen as my crown and my glory. Watching the amount of time and money my mother would spend in and out of hair salons made me understand the importance of hair and the role it played in shaping my identity. But however, with hair comes its own politics, which has brought me to hairology. So just a bit of reference, this is the book that I was talking about by Palesa, made in 2019. Yeah, and basically the steps into how hairology came about. So obviously with me, myself and the class had to do our homework, and I had asked them, questions such as, what comes to mind when you hear the word hair? Yeah, what does hair mean to you? Yeah, and what is good hair and what is bad hair? Yeah, and a lot of the responses, there was a common thread between the responses, and basically the common thread is that good hair or hair that is accepted in society is Eurocentric, straight and long. Yeah. While I was no surprise to this answer, I was shocked to learn that the common thread between the caste and the relationship towards their hair was that it was just hair to them. Yeah. For me, hair holds so much weight and value, and for it to be considered just hair, it just astounds me. Yeah. It holds my roots, my ethnicity, and most importantly, my identity. Yeah, for people of color, I would imagine it being the same, since black hair is something that the Western parts of the world have always found to be inferior and unacceptable. Yeah, to much extent of having their heads shaved as a way of denying our value, roots, and identity. Yeah. And then just a short audio in terms of what one of my class members had said during rehearsal with regards to her hair.
Of course, yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, I've had the privilege of, but don't do it. Cool, let's go. I feel that this play is important because it's relevant. I feel like there's a lot of discourse about cultural appropriation in terms of hair and why black people or people of color, black people, why are we gatekeeping our hair? Why do we get so touchy and emotional when it comes to hair? And I feel like this play is the answer. It's like we go through so much, and it doesn't matter like whether you're young or old. We've got like different age perspectives of like age groups, and it's all like divulging into this like this is what hair means. It's not just for everyone. It's not just this thing of like, yeah, it's just an extension, it's just an extension. Like, there's a lot of weight to it. So I feel like it answers a lot of questions people have about like, why does this matter so much? Like returning through the story.
And also things like even not it, like
Okay, so that was just what one of the cast members had said. So then we go into the groundwork, such as laying the foundations for the play, and the 5 stories that I had chosen from the play all came around conversations that me and the cast had about hair and what hair means to them, and just their shared experiences. So I ended up picking 5 stories that somehow related to what their responses were, and with the foundations came with, trying to find the layers within the piece, such as having it set in a salon, yeah? And I chose the salon because the salon is the intersecting of the practical, such as the hair getting done, and the dialogue where the stories are shared. So the salon changes from a place of doing work to now a space of intimacy and a safe space for the characters, yeah? And I also incorporated this idea of a laboratory space where the salon becomes a space of torture being experimented on. When you go to the salon, you're always worried how your hair is going to turn out after you. It can either go either way. So that is something that I experimented with. And with the idea of the time period, I set it in current South Africa and give it a date because it allows it to be fluid and contemporary, right? Because some of these conversations can date back years, and we can even go forward with some of these conversations that are placed in the salon. Yeah. And then another response from a cast member is, I genuinely wonder why some women prefer to cut their hair. I wonder how boys survive their whole life with short hair. Like barely having hair on your head is normal. Yeah? It's just something. And then with regards to the literature and content, so I basically drew some of with the foundations from a professor by the name of Ingrid Banks from her book, Hair Matters, Beauty, Power and Black Women's Consciousness. And basically in the book, she illustrates how hair shapes Black women's ideas about race, gender, class, sexuality, image of beauty and power. Bank also goes on to highlight how scholars writing about hair emphasizes the importance of hair among Blacks in relationship to Africa, constructions of race, enslavement, skin color, self-esteem, ritual aesthetics, appropriate grooming practices, images of beauty, politics, identity, and the intersection of gender, of race and gender. And the second literary source that I laid the foundations with is by Robson, entitled Hair's Race, Why Good Hair May Be Bad for Black Females. And she basically goes on to say that good hair could potentially be bad for the identity of Black females, in the sense that the importance of Black hair being kept as a practice in the culture and identity. Robson also uses the data she's collected during interviews with multiple women and their experiences to support her arguments and to generate new knowledge around hair, which is exactly what I've done with this piece. I've just incorporated stories to give it a light sense. And then some of the influences that came about was pop music artists such as India Ari, the lyrics from I'm Not My Hair. Good hair means curls and waves. Bad hair means you look like a slave. At the turn of the century, it's time for us to redefine who we be. You can shave it off like a South African beauty, or get it on a lock like Bob Marley. You can rock it straight like Oprah Winfrey. If it's not what's on your head, it's what's underneath. And then again, some of the influences that I'm still kind of trying to experiment with, because it's an ongoing process. Because with the exam only being in August, of this idea of iconographic hair, in a sense that we have, you know, the famous Diana Ross with her afro, Lauryn Hill with the locks, Venus and Serena Williams with their beaded braids, Janet Jackson in Poetic Justice with box braids coming out with that, Tina Turner and the shag look, etc. So this is stuff that was all going to be experimented with. And then basically the themes of the story align to a particular character. Multiple themes can belong to different characters within the story. We have hair politics, identity, religion, beauty standards, societal norms, and each character represents one of them. The character of Alia, identity being found in the length of her hair and religion as she is Muslim. The character of Zola, beauty standards, how her daughter's uncontrollable and unwashable hair becomes her issue because she's the mother. Amandla, which is hair politics, questioning why can't hair just be hair. And Mamelo, where beauty standards, it's unusual for a black girl to have long hair and how the mirror is her biggest enemy along with those around her. And then in conclusion, basically horology is not just a play about hair, but it's a journey of learning and understanding each other's backgrounds through the mode of hair. It challenges societal norms and the patriarchy, and it demands for women of color to exist freely in a space without judgment of the things that they cannot control, such as their hair. It also asks you to remove the chain that the Western culture has attached towards their hair. To the brown and black girls, may you never forget the power your hair holds, but may it also never weigh you down anywhere you go. Hair can just be hair. Thank you.
Thank you, Lyndré. Sorry for mispronouncing.
It's okay.
Can we get Mbali and Micaela up here? And Lyndré, and then we can open up while you're thinking about your questions and answers. Questions, and they're thinking about answers. What is very interesting and what I liked about all your presentations is that you're using your bodies to theorize. And sometimes, whether you're doing it through your body, your physical body, whether you're doing it through your endometriosis, which affects you on a daily basis, or whether you're doing it through your hair, which is a marker of identity. And many times we kind of are thinking about theories, and I say this to my students a lot. We're thinking about theories and we're trying to grab onto people's theories, Sarah Ahmad, bell hooks, which I have no problem with that. But sometimes it's easier to use yourself and your own. You can be your own theory. You can create ways of thinking through these different issues. And in this case for you, Mbali, when you said you're an academic slave, for a long time, I used to say I'm an academic slut, and people would look at me, and it has nothing to do with slaves because I've moved around too many institutions. I have no allegiance with any, but your idea of owning this academic slave kind of gives me this, like I can go around now publicly saying I'm an academic slut. But I was really interested in the way you put yourself and you look at yourself, but through these other icons of women who in a way, you were talking about Dina's keynote this, but in the South African context, because that's exactly what she was saying. She did reference even Kanye Bawa at that point. But how do women own these spaces? How do they refuse? Brenda Fassie, Lebo, Kanye, and yourself now. How are you refusing to conform to societal pressure? So that was very interesting for me. And for you, Micaela, I think one of the interesting things about Afems is that it's an interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary conference, and for a long time we have battled to get people who come and talk to us about medical science or the science. And so for you to come here and talk about endometriosis and then link it way back to women's hysteria has been, I mean, that is a mind-opening. It's opened up my mind to the way in which we can think about these things. And Lyndré, thank you, about higher politics. Have you read Coconut by Kopano Matwa? It starts off with one of the characters, Fifi, Ophelia were in a salon and they're pulling and she's pulling and as they're pulling and straightening and she has these words about this process that is going through and she says someone's grandma, my grandmother or somebody's grandmother told me hair beauty is pain. And it really doesn't have to be. And the way in which you've talked about hair, and I would really like to read what you're saying in your play about hair is really important because I have my own politics about hair. So we can talk about that. But yes, now I've given you time to get your questions together. All right, great. Okay, we'll start with Tumi, then Miss B, and then Jamil. I don't know your name yet, but I will know it at some point. So let's start Tumi, Miss B, Jamil, and then.
Thank you so much for all those presentations. It's been really difficult to choose which session to go to. I don't know if it's just me, so but I'm really glad that I ended up here. I am curious, Mbali, about the languages. So when you talk about academic slut or an academic slave queen, I feel that I'm an academic Mazibuko. So like, what else are we calling ourselves, particularly in South African languages? And I'm curious as what are the names that we give ourselves in order to identify ourselves as those rebels or those renegades. And then maybe for a question for all of you, and something I've been curious about is respectability politics within these conversations, and I think they are at play in some degree or another. And Mbali, you speak quite specifically to it in your presentation. So yeah, those are my two questions.
Thanks, Tumi. Miss B. Is that Miss B? No.
Who's Miss B?
You. What's on your?
Oh, Princess.
Huh?
Princess.
No, who's Miss B? Oh, anyway. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I know
Princess.
Miss B. All right. Thank you so much to the speakers. Mbali, thank you for confirming that you're an academic slave. I remember seeing your post on Facebook with your gown in bed and your nails done, and I was like, this is such an academic slave thing. But also thinking about it in the sense of how sometimes women who clean up are almost always sometimes questioned in feminist spaces. Like, though you're not feminist enough because you've weaved and all sorts of things. But here you are saying it's also okay to be literally smart because you're a smart woman. I just wanted to comment on the ideas that I think all three of you touched on, the idea of the body as text, body as theory, body as method even. Because we know that most of the languages that have been offered to us, which we are suspicious of in language, mostly spoken text, spoken word, is the only form of like legitimate forms of knowledge. So to bring the body to the fore as text, as archive, as evidence to the work that you're doing, for me was quite commendable.
Thank you. Thank you. Princess? Yes?
Mbali.
Hi, Jamil.
I just wanted to add also just to some of the things that you were saying and sort of my own interrogation. So I'm so funny because recently I had a conversation about the term slave queen and its origins and its trajectory, right? And just thinking about the fact that the origins of the term was really a celebration of Black women and their agency and their expressions of. I mean, first of all, it's a highly race and gendered term, but its origins is that of celebration of being. Celebration of beauty, celebration of visibility, celebration of having fun and doing what you want to do, right? And then the trajectory of that term when men, realize that women are having fun without them. It was turned on its head into a slur.
Yeah.
Right? And then, so just to I mean, I think there's something deeply sinister about that process, right? And it's reflective of a bigger politics of how there's a constant need to diminish and condemn any form of expression of a black woman that does not rely on the validation of a man.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking then, as you employed the term killjoy, right? Feminist killjoy in this instance is, so we know that the joy that's being killed by a feminist killjoy is in fact not joy at all. It's oppressive expressions that men or other differently gendered people who have that kind of patriarchal power enjoy doing, and that's where the joy comes from. Is I enjoy oppressing and shutting you down. And when you come in and you employ feminist principles in how you interact with me, you're spoiling the fun that I have in oppressing you, right? But additionally to that, if you think about it, the reality is that men are actual, literal killjoys.
Yes.
And the joy,
Yes.
that idea of killing joy is quite literally killing women in order to stop that joy from being expressed.
Absolutely.
Women and queer people, and to erase that joy that vexes themselves, right? And so when we think about how we employ the term feminist killjoy, it's highly metaphorical. But in reality, the real killjoys are men, by physically killing us, right? So that I just wanted to offer that interrogation of what you said.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you all speakers. I'm feeling quite inspired at this moment. First question for, is that Micaela?
Yep.
Yes, Micaela. No, thank you for that discussion. It's something that's been on my mind, just looking at the history of gynecology. And I was reading, I was quite a while back, I read a text, and it was looking at the history of queer people within America, and it was looking at trans bodies. But the text was interesting, even though it was looking at a history of trans bodies, it started the story in the gynecological room within those slave pits. And you said something interesting about how those, you said though the findings from those studies were not valid. They were not valid because they were not consensual. See, I have a problem with that claim because it's not that they weren't valid, it's that they weren't ethical. The problem with science is that science isn't actually about ethics. A lot of the findings come from torturing, exploitation, particularly exploitation and use of black bodies, women bodies as well. So, I mean, this is what with my question, I want to know, have you looked at maybe within that section how those practices still continue today, especially in the forms of how today you'll still hear stories of how when they interview med students and the question is, do black people, if you have the skin color, what are their chances of them feeling pain? And med students will still say no, because of this, if you have darker skin color, you have less chance of feeling pain. So I mean, for me, it's like that colonial legacy still seeps through. And also the basic fact, which is kind of scary, the gynecological tools that we use today are the same tools that we used in that racist man that he invented. Yeah. So the fact that there's not even been a development in how we do that investigation, a very, what's that word, very intrusive, yeah. So yeah, could you speak on that? And then last speaker, you said something, hair can just be hair. Am I hearing you correct? And because you showed the performance in the videos, you were speaking to the politicized nature of hair, unpacking it, and then you ended with hair is not blue. Can you please explain that very loaded statement? And also, what I found was missing from your discussion was also like how, the issues, how 4C hair, the issue is 4C hair. Whether you're colored, whether you're black, there's a whole range of hairs. And it just seems everything we're doing with our hair is about how do we run away from this thing called 4C. You will never see 4C in the media. And when you do see 4C in the media, then you see colored people's hair, or is it the 3B coil? So even it irritates me when you see a black man and a white woman, a black man and a black woman in ads. You'll actually notice that it's not even the 4C hair, it's the 3B hair. So can you also make mention of that colorism? And because I also see this, even in your presentation, you showed all the hair, the hair that has been excluded, but you also missed out, in doing so, you also missed out the elephant in the room, and that is weaves. Women with weaves, men with weaves, how do we, where does all of this fit in? Yes, I love my hair, yes, I love my 4C hair, but at the same time, there's still those of us who wear weaves, and I'm not necessarily saying it's because of self-hatred, but we're all dealing with our own demons in our own way. How can we create a space whereby, or a feminism that allows for all our hairs to have purpose and not exclude any? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I think you talked about the weaves, but anywho, can we have them respond? And we might not have any time for any other questions. And who wants to start?
I don't mind.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay. So thank you for your question about naming, right? And now that I'm thinking about it, I think a lot of the naming practices, particularly for Black women, that we then use as a way of reclaim, actually come from being cognizant of how pervasive the cautionary tale of femininity is, right? It's that when you think about Mazibuko saying, yes, Lebo Matosa, right? But when you think about the context that has been used when we grew up, it's not a good thing. I thought Uskai gets a Mazibuko saying. Do you get what I'm saying? Uskai gets a Matoboza. Like there's a lot of that happens in especially in Black families where they say, don't be Mazibuko saying, you understand? So I think even when Jamil was mentioning that the term slay queen, particularly in South Africa, was hijacked, right? And it has been appropriated in a very masculine way. And this is why I think I took it a step further by looking at its history even before the hijacking, which is in its context in drag room culture, the instruction to slay is telling you, do your best. You know what I'm saying? And I think maybe even looking at that also shows how these feminist histories and these queer histories are very connected. And it's very important, I think, to acknowledge that so that when we are then reclaiming, we understand what it is that we're trying to do. And it's that we're saying that I get this cautionary tale, but I'm no longer working by its script, right? This doesn't make sense. I'm not afraid of being Mazibuko saying, because for me, it does something for me to live in that and to be that person, because I have seen Mazibuko saying as a powerful figure, right? I find that she is living in her erotic, this is her full creative life. Why would you not want that? It's like, why are grandmothers telling us not to be that? But again, it's because they have been living by this cautionary tale. And the pervasiveness of the cautionary tale, I think, again, Jamil's comment, and I'm just going to address it now, is I do think, and I'm not sure if there's any work on it, but with the increase of this kind of more public performance and this visibility of these kinds of femininities digitally, I think there's some kind of correlation with, again, these very like increasing grotesque forms of violence against our bodies as well. It's like the more we want to show and claim, especially digitally, because again, it's that public space being expanded, is the more we're hearing, this person yesterday, was violated in this way, or so and so. And again, it's again showing us how pervasive the cautionary tale is. Because it's then masculinity saying, no, you're doing too much. You can't do that. You know what I'm saying? You don't get to pose that way on Instagram and women cheer you on and you think there's no consequence. We're going to show you that women like that get treated in this way. And again, you become this cautionary tale. So it's trying to reinforce. And I think the naming and wanting to reclaim, I think historically and names that are politically, I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Yes, it's this, we are enmeshed. I think we are enmeshed. But I think the point is then we are doing the work. And it's these politically oblique ways. It's not always legible, but it's happening, right? And that last point I really did want to share, guys, on Kanimba, but it's done. Okay. There's this very interesting picture of her sitting on a Lamborghini with her legs open. It's a recent one. And then there's an older picture of Brenda Fassie in a very similar pose with her red BMW, right? It's very interesting to me how there are critiques of capitalist consumption, and having access to things like that because of, right? But it's to say, which kinds of women are subject to those critiques? Because Brenda Fassie wasn't, but that was still a display of wealth. And that image is still very much celebrated, but this one is not. Again, cautionary tales in space and time and history. And again, I think it shows us the development of even feminism as well, is that the lenses that we then use kind of shift. And that's the point, you know? So, yeah.
Taylor?
Thank you for your comment and question. And listening to you kind of highlight that, I do see how the word valid might not have been the correct choice. So yes, maybe valid was not my, what I meant. But it comes down to that thing of non-consent and not acknowledging what that individual wanted or did not want, for example. And I also need to acknowledge that the direction that this has gone into is quite new. It's kind of a new discovery, going back into history, looking where this originated from. So it needs more development in that sense. And also due to my time constraints, I couldn't get into everything, where I did read a big section on how Black women are perceived to feel less pain than white women, which is problematic. I mean, how, based on what? How can you say that? The other thing I wanted to say was that the practices, historically, yes, they are still the same. Why are they still the same? Why has it not developed and progressed? Also considering technologically where we're currently at. Why do they still use the same tools, still use the same practices? And also, as I was writing my paper, coming to the section where I need to talk about my own experience, only then to me, and after reading all these, historical things, only then to me did it come about that my experience, the one that I've explained, that I touched on, was really problematic. Something so simple, which in that moment to me felt uncomfortable, or it was bothering me, but not really knowing, what, why, and how. Whereas now, researching, looking into the historical notions, now it becomes clearer to me.
Okay, thank you for your questions. So with regards to 4C and weaves, etc., throughout the piece itself, the characters do celebrate all types of hair. In terms of that their hair transforms. So 4C hair is celebrated. Weaves are celebrated. I just didn't have time to necessarily go into depth in terms of how the transformations take place, but I want to make it known that all types of hair is celebrated within the piece. And then with regards to the idea of hair just being hair, I'm the type of person that takes a lot of pride in my hair. I don't just let anybody touch my hair. Yeah, and because I see it, I've always been taught that it is part of me and it extends beyond me. Yeah, but I could wake up the next morning and my hair is on the pillow, and then that's that, and then you move on with life. So that's what I meant when I said hair is just hair. You move on and you just keep going. Yeah. Yes.
Purposeful, we have run out of time, but you can ask them during lunchtime. We have run out of time, and I don't want you to. Some of us haven't eaten.
No, I just wanted to say something just in relation to what you just said.
Quickly, 1 minute.
It just connects next to the press conversation we had earlier today, where we were talking about us being complex people. Because for me personally, my hair is my resistance journey, but I have an 8-year-old who has very strong hair that I don't know what to do with, and I want her to lock it. So I want to do the sister locks on it. And everybody else then saying to me that you can't decide what to do with her hair. You're a feminist. Let her choose what she wants to do with her hair. And that's when I also use, it's just hair. When she grows up, she can cut it off, do it again. And so it's just the complexities, because my own story is different. I take it very personal, very political, and then I still subscribe in a way to hair is just hair. In fact, I go to the extreme and sometimes say, it's not population, it's gonna grow. But yeah, that was
Thank you, Mbali. Thank you. Okay, can we just thank our presenters for giving us this story?